Hey there, astrology lover. I recently asked astrologer, author, and professor Richard Tarnas why he's so inspired to teach his upcoming workshop, Your Astrological Initiation, with his daughter Becca. And this is what he said.
I just saw this, as did Becca, a great opportunity to try to provide a way of understanding what the astrological mystery is about. We're hoping to give those who are in the workshop a sense of grounding, of foundations, of a larger framework of understanding within which their adventure in astrology can unfold with greater fruitfulness. It's a powerful tool. And so we want to give a sense for the great privilege and therefore also responsibility that comes with astrology to see its nobility and to recognize how to present the information that we get from our astrological study, to do that in a way that is true to its highest potential.
If you're interested in getting the perspective and wisdom you need to ensure that you're always using astrology for good and minimizing its potential for harm, then this workshop is for you. You can learn more and join us now at astrologyhub.com/initiation. Class starts soon, so make sure and check it out now at astrologyhub.com/initiation. Rick and Becca can't wait to see you in class. Welcome to your weekly astrological weather. This is your place to get practical guidance for not only surviving, but thriving with the cosmic tides. Okay, welcome everybody. It is so wonderful to be here with all of you. And I'm thrilled to be here again with Becca Tarnas, this time for the weekly weather. We did have Becca on the podcast last week, and it was an incredible episode. I told Becca, I think it was my favorite episode that she and I have had the pleasure of doing. And it's definitely worth tuning into. If you want to check that out, it's at astrologyhub.com/Becca episode. And so we're here today for the weekly weather for the week of September 19th through the 25th. And this is also the week that we will be hosting Becca and her father, Richard Tarnas, for the workshop, Your Astrological Initiation. And Becca, I'd love to just take a moment to ask you a couple questions about that, because I know you and your dad are busy with your preparations for the workshop. And I'd love to ask you why the word initiation? Like, why specifically that word?
We wanted to bring forward the initiatory quality of what happens when we encounter astrology. And it was in our conversations all together when we were figuring out what we wanted to offer for the workshop that this phrase or this term kept coming up of initiation. And it's one that I've heard my dad use a lot over the years. He'll reference like, oh, those who are initiated into the astrological mystery, or those who've had their initiation into astrology. And it felt fitting for really what we were wanting to offer, which is in some ways, how do you live within an astrological worldview? And so that context of the worldview is what's really important here, because so many of us were raised in a modern, postmodern worldview that sees the cosmos as disenchanted, as meaningless, purposeless, not intelligent. And when individuals encounter astrological correlations and feel seen by the cosmos, that is a radical shift in worldview. It kind of breaks your old paradigm. And so there is a kind of death of the old self, the old way of being. And that's very much what an initiation is. It is a kind of death rebirth mystery. And so that's why we chose that term, and also really what we're going to be speaking about kind of the larger context that we're holding in throughout the workshop.
So for those who have been studying astrology for a long time already, can they become initiates again? I mean, is this something for brand new students to astrology, or can we be initiated kind of over and over again?
I mean, I always find that whenever I'm doing new research into astrology, whether that's preparing for a class or writing an article, or even, preparing for a counseling session, when I was doing that regularly, I would continue to have moments of kind of revelation where, I don't know if others of you experience this, but you can be so steeped in astrology where you reach a moment of like, is this really working? Like, is this real? And then something happens, this kind of perfect alignment or synchronicity of what's going on in someone's life and, what was happening during their transits at that time, or, countless other examples where I do think we keep getting a kind of reinitiation, maybe not as shocking as the first time, but that there is this continuous unfolding and sense of revelation, because with each new correlation that we see, the cosmos reveals itself more fully to us. And so, yeah, I do think that we keep being initiated and we keep being awakened to the astrological mystery.
So beautiful. Okay, so for new students to astrology, this is going to be the most amazing setting the tone for your astrological journey. And for seasoned initiates already, this will be an opportunity for a reinitiation, a reawakening, a rejuvenation. So we would love to have you all in class. One more question, Becca.
Yeah.
What has it been like kind of behind the scenes between you and your dad in the preparations for this class?
It's been, it hasn't been very rigidly structured, if that makes sense. It's been like conversations that burst up all over the place because we do so much work together, and our fields are completely overlapping. We're often in communication, and so sometimes I feel like I want to just mine my text messages for deep kind of astrological and philosophical insights of like, God, I really should get this out of my phone and into a document. It blows me away how much goes on in there, probably because we both text from our computers. So it's like these long texts come through. So it's funny, the planning takes place sometimes on the phone, sometimes over text, sometimes on Zoom. I had this idea. And one of the ways actually, when we were creating the curriculum, we were talking on the phone. He was kind of having more of a stream of consciousness flow, and I was typing. And we were taking turns with that document, where after that conversation, I went in and I added more material and then sent it to him. And collaborating is a really interesting process because it doesn't take place in the same way that when you're creating a course, you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and think these things through. And it's like, you have to check every little detail. And is that okay? And my way of phrasing it's maybe a little different. And, anyone who's read Cosmos and Psyche knows that choosing just the right words in just the right order is really important to my father. And I completely agree with that. So that kind of gives a picture of what our process has been.
It's so heartwarming. I can't even tell you, just that to imagine you two texting back and forth and having these aha moments and transcribing brilliant ideas for each other. It's so inspiring as a mother, to think that kind of bond and relationship is possible with your adult children. And it's just so beautiful. It's like, I love imagining this. If you ever feel inspired, and if it was something that wasn't divulging, obviously anything too private, if you ever felt inspired to take a screenshot of a text message between you two, it would be so fun to share it in our Mighty Networks for the Inner Circle, just so we can get a taste of this is how these two are talking and preparing for this class. So Yes. All right. Well, let's get on to the weekly weather. Oh, before we do that, it's astrologyhub.com/initiation. That's astrologyhub.com/initiation. It's happening this Wednesday. If you cannot make it live, do not worry at all. The recording will be in your online learning library within 24 hours. So you'll be able to catch up and then either join us live for the live Q&A the following week, or same thing, just tune into the recording. And even if you can't join the live Q&A, you're still going to have an opportunity to get your question answered, because we gather all the questions beforehand, and then we give those to Rick and Becca, and then they're going to be answering the questions that come in before the live Q&A. When we have time, we also take live questions. So that is a possibility as well. But yes, as many of you as can join, we'd love to have you. This is an incredible opportunity to be in the presence of this like super powerhouse intergenerational duo of Richard and Becca Tarnas. So again, Becca, thank you for trusting us with your work and with your father's work and being a part of our community in this way.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure. And we both feel like we're being just very, very well treated, I have to say. So thank you.
Yay. Well, yes, that's good. Okay. And you'll be well treated by our community too. This is the best group of students ever. You're just there. It's yes. Okay. Let's talk about the week ahead. What would you say is the overarching theme that we're working with this week?
Well, I love that you asked me for this particular week, because one of the things that we're looking at is the upcoming equinox. So in the northern hemisphere, it's the autumn equinox, in the southern, it's the spring equinox. And then that's marked astrologically by the ingression of the sun into Libra. And so I would see that shift as maybe the overarching theme for the week. And there's a number of really beautiful transits that are happening at the same time around this, because the new moon follows not too long after the shift into Libra season. And so there is a sense in these few days where it's September 22nd that the sun ingresses into Libra, that we have the equinox. And then the new moon is kind of right between 24th, 25th. So that sense of a new cycle is coming through at multiple levels. It's a new season, it's a new lunar cycle. And of course, that's being colored, as we'll look into in more detail, by a number of different planetary aspects, by transits. But that sense of it's a turning over of a new leaf. And of course, here in the northern hemisphere, I live in the forest, so I think I see this really distinctly. The leaves falling, that shift into fall, and a kind of palpable sense of something ending, something new coming in at these multiple levels, and doing it under, I have to say, some really beautiful conditions, especially as we get into the latter part of that week.
Okay, we'll go there next, but can you spend a little more time on the significance of the equinox? Because I know cultures have been celebrating the equinox and the solstice forever. Why? Like, what is the significance of it?
Well, just speaking astronomically first, and geologically, the equinox is when the Earth is at the point in its orbital path around the sun that the light coming in from the sun hits the Earth at such an angle that we have an equal day and equal night. So the word equinox means equal night, equinox. And so that there is this sense of kind of balance that's present there, a balance between day and night, the shift into the sun being in Libra as well that sign is all about balance. It's the scales, the weighing of the scales, and kind of holding things in a balance and in an equality. And with Venus being the ruler of Libra, there is that quality as well of balance in a harmonious way, and kind of holding things in a beautiful or ordered sort of equilibrium with each other. And so that significance really marking the shift of the seasons, the time of equal light and equal dark. I think we feel it very palpably at a somatic and maybe emotional level as well. And it's that the marking of the seasons, the astrologers talk so much about what's the difference between like the tropical zodiac and the sidereal and so on. And I think part of why I was so eager to be focusing on this week is this transition into fall or into spring, depending which hemisphere you're living in. That is an earthly experience, and there's no question about that being a very significant marker, whatever zodiac you're working with.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. So you alluded to some other transits that are happening this week that is really adding to this kind of balanced and harmony and this beautiful energy of the equinox. Do you want to take it from today, Monday, though? Do you want to just walk us through the days?
Yes, let's do that. That sounds good. Well, we start off, and I'll just say what I usually focus on when I'm looking at the transits coming ahead. I tend to focus more on planetary aspects than planets and signs. So I can bring in the planets and the signs, but what really stands out to me qualitatively are the alignments the planets are making with each other. And so on Monday, September 19th, we have two exact alignments of planets with each other. I'm going to bracket the moon for a second because it moves so quickly. But we have the sun coming into an exact trine to Pluto. And we have Venus coming into an exact trine with Uranus. And so what we see there is looking first at the sun trine Pluto. They're both harmonious, interestingly, being trines. They're both kind of more confluent, harmonious, soft aspects. But there's a mutual activation of these archetypal energies. And the sun in world transits, tends to highlight and illuminate and bring focus onto what it touches. So with Pluto, it has more to do with the depths, with what's hidden, what is below the surface of things, maybe illuminating things that we don't always see clearly, or illuminating, it may be more transformational or evolutionary processes. I wouldn't necessarily see the sun trine Pluto coming through in the way we might see like sun opposite Pluto or sun square Pluto, where it could be like an illumination of really shadowy material. But it could be some of that, or it could be more of an integration of things of like, oh, I really needed to look at that. But it's easier to handle at this point, like looking into the dark, the hidden things, the underbelly, but more of an opportunity to integrate that in a healthier way. And then with Venus forming a trine to Uranus, this too being a more confluent aspect, Uranus awakens whatever it touches, it liberates that. And so in this case, it's that liberation of the Venusian, of Aphrodite, of the beautiful, the exquisite, the loving. And I find that Venus, Uranus, and the world transits will come through where there's more of a draw to be like socially open and in a playful, eccentric, kind of excited way. It can be a more socially active alignment. And that sense of like an opening of the heart that can be present too, or an awareness of aesthetics, or of the arts or of beauty that feels more unusual or unique or quirky or curious or eccentric, those qualities that Uranus brings in. So I think having those simultaneously, the Sun Pluto on the one hand, which kind of brings us into the depths, but it's illuminating those depths, and then the Venus Uranus, which is a bit more light, playful, social, loving, sensual and sexy as well. Like Venus Uranus can have that quality to it. So that's peaking on Monday the 19th.
That was my next question. I know it's exact on that day, but how long do we feel these types of energies before and after?
So for a trine, I would look, honestly, I would look 10 degrees out. So I would start noticing this come in the week before. But as they tighten in with each other, you would really be feeling this in, the 3-4 days prior, and then same afterwards as well. I would often see it it's like a slow fade in, more and more correlations, and then it peaks and then kind of coming down on the other side.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay.
Tuesday, we have definitely we'll have a carryover of the Sun Pluto and the Venus Uranus. Tuesday, the 20th, is full of the moon making many different aspects. And that's kind of the main feature in terms of exact alignments that's happening on Tuesday. The moon shifts over the course of the day from an opposition to Pluto into a sextile with the sun. So I'll loop back to that because that's the balsamic moon, the closing phase of the sun moon dance. And then the moon ingresses into Leo. So it's moved out of Cancer into Leo. It was in Cancer the day before. And as it enters into Leo, then it forms a sextile to Mercury, which is retrograde. And then finally finishing up with this trine to Jupiter. So that's quite a story for Tuesday in terms of the moon touching on almost half the planets.
Is that unusual, Becca?
It's not that unusual. It depends on really where the other planets are. I'll notice that there are some days where you just see the moon sweeping through a bunch of aspects. And I like to track these days because the moon connects to our emotions, our feelings, our bodies, our somatic sensibility. And when we pay attention to what the moon is doing over the course of the day, because the moon moves very quickly, it can move 12 to 15 degrees a day. And when it makes a whole series of aspects like this, we literally feel it. We feel it in our bodies. We feel it in our emotions. Because it moves so quickly, it's often hard to track. I mean, you could be a full-time lunar transit tracker, and that would be a full-time job. How am I feeling now? How am I feeling now? And I think it's a great exercise for students to take on, like take a week where you're just tracking the moon's transits and notice your emotional and somatic response to that. So it's not terribly rare, I would say. The moon is constantly moving through aspects, but I do find it interesting to notice those days where, like in this case, there's a changing of signs right in the middle of it. And there are no other planetary aspects that are moving into exact alignment that day. Obviously, they're going on. And so I think it tells a story, right? The day begins with the moon opposite Pluto, which can bring in more deep or intense feelings. We may feel kind of more emotionally raw. So check how you're feeling that morning. And then we're coming into, the moon sextile the sun, which is that closing crescent in the lunar cycle, the balsamic moon. And that too has a feeling of, I'm moving toward the end of a cycle. I'm moving toward the new moon. The energy is waning. The moon is literally waning. And there's a kind of harmonious but subtle balance between the solar kind of energetic principle and the lunar, more intimate side of ourselves. So both of those indicate a more of an inward motion, I would say, as the cycle wanes, as one may be feeling or dealing with deeper, more intense emotional experiences. But then the moon moves into Leo, which is an interesting place for the moon. It leaves its home sign of Cancer and enters into the sun's realm, where traditionally it wouldn't be seen as in fall or in detriment there. But the moon in Leo is still answering to the sun. And as the moon is answering to the sun in that sign, and we think of the moon being in a balsamic phase, I do get the sense of how the moon is doing is a little more, the moon isn't in full kind of expression of self. It's more like, oh, it's time to tuck in, time to tuck inward, right? And this is just 2 days before that shift of the seasons we're talking about. And I do think there's that sense of like summer's ending. Like everyone's going back to school. Everyone's going back to, more maybe mental or intellectual way of being. I know for me personally, I always find it easier to like read and study and so on as the weather gets cooler. So that going inward feeling. But then what happens, the last two aspects that the moon makes on that day, on Tuesday, is it starts to highlight by soft aspect the Mercury-Jupiter opposition that's in the sky and has been in the sky for some time and will continue to be. The reason we're getting this long Mercury-Jupiter opposition is because Mercury stationed retrograde opposite Jupiter and then has just been coming back in closer in that opposition to Jupiter. So they're hanging out with each other. Mercury and Jupiter are looking at each other. And I'm even noticing it right now as I'm speaking. Mercury Jupiter likes to talk a lot. Long sentences, big ideas, loquacious, logorrhea, and so on. And so the end of Tuesday, the moon lights that up by soft aspect, sextile Mercury, trine Jupiter, and I think brings that more verbaceous and very long conversational quality, particularly into the emotional sphere, the relational domain, the home, the family. I could imagine this playing out Tuesday evening as long conversations at home. Or if you think about it in a participatory sense, maybe a good time to have long conversations at home or with family members. I'm just realizing I'll probably be having long conversations with one of my family members because we have a workshop the next day. So things like that is what I would see with that kind of lunar story over the course of Tuesday.
Fun. I love that tracking of that storyline. That's a really cool thing to do. Okay. And then that brings us to Wednesday, your workshop day.
Yes, it does. Definitely the Mercury Jupiter will be present. And you'll be experiencing the long sentences and
so maybe plan that it's going to be longer than what we think potentially.
Well, if I do have the direct experience that in my dad's courses, he would the closer you get to the end, the more there is to say. And we know we have 4 hours, which is a full amount of time. And we're certainly going to be filling it, but it's my commitment to Saturn that will end on time. But hopefully in a positive sense, that will come through as like really rich material and big ideas and a kind of grandeur to what we can inspire in others' thinking. I mean, these are the really positive sides of Mercury, Jupiter, where an abundance of intellectual stimulation and ideas and engaging with higher thought and higher education and broadening your scope of intellect and so on. That's all Mercury, Jupiter. So that's very much going to be a dominant factor throughout that day as well. The one exact alignment that comes through on the 21st is the moon forming a sextile to Mars. And it's a nice subtle connection between the two, the 60-degree sextile. And I find this combination can be quite activating and like physically activating, emotionally activating. Both the moon and Mars relate in different ways to the body. The moon more in like a fully somatic sense, Mars more like our energy and the fire in our blood and our desire to move. That's why it's connected to athleticism, for example. And so that moon Mars, even though it's just the soft sextile, it can inject some like restlessness or higher energy into the day. Probably not to the degree, again, as we might see with an opposition, conjunction, or square, where it might be like really emotionally irritable. A recommendation I often give to people for Moon Mars alignments in the world transits, it's a great time to clean your house. Like you get moving, you're in the home, you're taking action, and you can put it to use in a way that feels fruitful and you get something done. Again, it's just a sextile here, not to downplay the sextile, but I don't think it'll have that same push as other Moon Mars alignments. But still, if you are coming to the workshop and you're going to be sitting for 4 hours, maybe work out beforehand, or also have certain, this is the advantage of being able to take classes on Zoom, is that you can move around and still watch and participate. And so I'm reminded of my days in graduate school where there would be students in the back doing yoga and stretching as they're taking in the lecture.
Nice.
Yeah. So that kind of energy. Shall we move to, let's see, Thursday, the 22nd? So what we have coming in here, and this definitely starts to come in on Wednesday evening, but it's really coming through Thursday morning as well, is the moon then moves into a T-square with the Saturn-Uranus square. And Saturn and Uranus, which have been in a square since early 2020, they're coming back in for their last very, very close alignment this fall. And they're so close at this point, they're within 1 degree. And the moon coming into a T-square with both can definitely have some tension that's present there. The moon is going to be putting a felt emphasis on that Saturn-Uranus. Of course, we could spend the entire time talking about Saturn-Uranus, but I won't do that. But the tension between Saturn-Uranus, where they really are, it really is a tension of opposites between freedom on the one hand, responsibility on the other, between the rules and the desire to be independent. And the moon, when it comes into a hard alignment like that with Saturn and Uranus, it really can bring about the feeling of something's got to give, emotionally or relationally. And the moon is making hard aspects to the Saturn-Uranus 4 times a month, especially as they're so tight right now. So this is kind of our weekly push on that. But there's something about the T-square in particular, where there is so much of a feeling of tension of opposites in the T-square, the opposition with that square between them, that reflects the nature of Saturn-Uranus. anyway. And so this is a morning in particular that I would suggest being really emotionally careful, sensitive, attuned, aware where your breaking points might be, aware what might feel stressed, what wants to give. It's not the only moment like this that's going to unfold under the Saturn Uranus, but this is a good opportunity to really pay attention to it. And I think we're seeing that on a larger scale with the Saturn Uranus in general. People are reaching a breaking point. People are reaching, whether it's with a job or a relationship or the economic situation in general, of this can't keep going. This isn't sustainable. Something has to change. Something has to give. And that's a much larger theme well beyond this week. But I think we may really feel it or feel attuned to that coming in Wednesday night, Thursday morning.
Becca, are we at the point in that process where the best strategy might be to surrender to the change that wants to happen? Are we still in the sort of push-pull of figuring out what the change needs to be? Like, where are we at? Because we've been in this process of being almost on a breaking point of new horizons and new directions for a while. Yeah. And so just where are we at in that storyline?
I think that is really going to, for everyone listening, it's really going to depend whatever your breaking point situation is. So to hold it in that context, but Saturn Uranus is about making the hard changes, the consequential changes. And Saturn Uranus changes can come through in two kind of major categories or forms. Because on the one hand, it can be the sudden break, the sudden collapse of old structures. And that often feels like it's beyond our choice. Like, something has to give, and then you see it give. And it does feel like, wow, that's beyond me. And then we're having to just learn to deal with the consequences. The other is where you are better able to participate in that. And here's where I think, you really have to sit down with your more mature, responsible self and say, can I take on the hard work, Saturn, that it's going to take to implement these changes in a lasting way? And that's really trying to hold the two archetypes together in a way that's mutually supportive, which is a very hard thing to do. But I think that's ultimately one of the big tasks or lessons of Saturn Uranus alignments in general. It's simultaneously looking to the past, at our own personal past, our historical collective past, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and then discerning from that what to bring forward into the future. And in some cases, that'll be a hard break with the past. And in others, it's this complex blending of tradition and innovation, right? Saturn, Uranus, tradition, innovation, the old and the new, working to bring change within the system so that the system does not collapse from under us. And again, that's really going to depend what your personal situation is that you're dealing with. Are you in a position where you want to maintain a system, but recognize that changes need to be made within that? Or are you in a position where you're like, this whole thing has to come down to the foundations? Because either way, there's cracks in the system. Does that make sense how I'm speaking to that?
Completely. And I see what you're saying too about why this can be so challenging, because staying in the old structures, at least the perception is that it takes less energy, that it's not as hard, because you can kind of just keep doing things the way you've been doing them. But the truth is, because those structures are being asked to break anyways, it's like, is it actually easier to stay in the old structures, or would it be better on all levels? Yes, it takes energy. Yes, it takes innovation. Yes, you have to meet it. You have to meet the thing and breathe new life into it in order to reimagine it and to bring a new structure into form.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I there's like several different areas of my life where I'm in that. And one is the homeschool community we are in with my children. It's like, here's the way school has been done. Is that really serving? Does that really work? And how do we do it differently? And can we sustain that question that you asked? Do we actually have the energy to sustain something new? And what's the honest answer to that? I mean, I think that it is complex. It is usually not just like a really, we're just going to stop doing that. And now we're going to do this. And it's all just going to work. It's like, this is what we're here to work out at this time.
And I think a theme that we often see with Saturn Uranus that can be quite challenging with it is when things break, that there are mistakes, that there are accidents, sometimes very literally accidents, but sometimes more just in, a mistake in interactions and so forth. And having to be flexible with the mistakes and the missed communications and the accidents. And that's usually where we see what the cracks in the system even are that need to change. And then that's where you weigh out the decision. Am I patching this up? Like, am I bringing in, I see a crack in the foundation. Am I bringing in new mortar to fortify that? Or do we need to root this whole foundation out and start over? And each one of us could probably identify multiple things in our personal lives where, like, you're holding that tension with your children's schooling, where is it a question of should they be educated at all? That's probably not on the chopping block, but how that happens. And that's where you can see you're still staying in a Saturnian framework. You're not questioning, maybe you're not questioning the validity of education as a whole,
right?
But how it's been done, what's being taught,
Yes.
Why we do it this way.
Yes.
So you can really, it's not overall change, but it's still a major rehaul and rethinking of whatever the particular problems are that face us.
I think the underlying current for all of us, or the underlying thread, is that at this point, we need to be meeting life where it's at and where it's wanting to take us. And there's a certain amount of, I want to use the word aliveness, but it's like, it's not a time to be on autopilot and just kind of let things go the way that they've always gone and not think about that. I mean, maybe that is the way it needs to go, but to really be having a little bit of a critical process around the things that are happening in our lives and meet it with that fresh energy of like, is this really serving? And if it's not, what needs to happen? And I love what you just said about being flexible enough to make mistakes and to receive mistakes being made towards you, both ways. It seems really important, that kind of softness with the process itself, because it is not established. It is not a road traveled before. And again, I think so many of us are here this time to revision a way forward. And there isn't here's how you do it manual. We're having to figure it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so much what the Saturn Uranus era is about. And we're still going to be in this world transit partway into 2023, but it's this last part of 2022 that's really, we're deep in it right now. And a lot of the themes that have come up in the last few years, this is kind of the last moment to address them before, the next big Saturn Uranus alignment will be the conjunction in the early 2030s. So, we can get our fill in both a positive and negative sense of the Saturn Uranus right now. And all the lessons, hard and liberating, that it has to teach us.
Okay, so it's the moon in a T-square to Saturn and Uranus that's really adding tension to the already existing tension around these topics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The moon moves into that T-square, and that happens to be the same day, September 22nd, that the sun ingresses into Libra. So that marks the equinox. And just as the sun crosses into tropical Libra, it conjoins Mercury retrograde at the same degree. So they meet at that moment, which I think is quite significant, because Mercury retrograde, which we have through the end of the month, also, I didn't notice this as an astrologer until the Saturn Uranus came into the sky, but Saturn Uranus in some ways is like a really big version of what happens in Mercury retrograde periods. Like, I'm trying to push forward. Nope, that's not going to work. I'm trying to do, nope, that's not going to work. Like, a lot of the having to go back and revise and redo and rethink that comes with Mercury retrograde. So we've got this almost like holographic quality between them where they're all really mirroring each other. And so the sun conjoining Mercury, which is retrograde at that moment, further emphasizes and highlights how Mercury is doing at this time, which Mercury may not be operating according to its normal programming, where the communications are flowing and everything's, moving smoothly in terms of all the domains that Mercury rules, in terms of ideas and thinking and learning and speaking and writing and education and commerce and travel and exchange. But what is good about that is it gives us an opportunity to slow down and reflect and rethink and review and revise, right? All these words that come with retrograde. And I just love that happens right at that equinox point, because speaking as someone in the Northern Hemisphere, the feeling of fall, when autumn comes in, it's also a time to slow down. The world is starting to cool off, go inward, get cozy. And that just feels so fitting to me that it would especially be happening at that mercurial, in that mercurial domain.
I love it.
And I have to say, this is the Tolkienian side of me. September 22nd is known as Hobbit Day amongst those who love the Lord of the Rings. And because it's when the great journey starts off for those characters. So I think it's not insignificant that Tolkien set that date when the adventure begins on September 22nd. So I just have to throw that in there.
Was that also the equinox, or did it fall on the equinox in the story?
It falls on the equinox.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's carrying that whole autumnal feeling.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So then when we move to the 23rd, Friday, Mercury continuing to move retrograde ingresses back into Virgo. So out of Libra, back into Virgo. So the sun and Mercury have switched places. And I think Mercury will be a little happier coming back into its sign of rulership and exaltation. And so even though Mercury is continuing to move retrograde through that time, I think it might be a little bit more comfortable. And perhaps even some of the challenges or the problems that have come up earlier in the retrograde period may have the opportunity to be addressed or solved or fixed, still using Mercury retrograde methods of review and revise, but maybe not quite as challenging. That would be my my kind of view on that. And then beautiful alignment that we have coming in the same day that reaches exactitude on this day is Venus opposing Neptune. And Venus with Neptune is it's the combination that brings forward like exquisite beauty, divine love, the sacred expressed through the beautiful. It's this union of the heavenly, the celestial, the sacred with the heart, with love, with our expressions of devotion. So it can be a very idealistic time, very romantic time, very dreamy. It can be, Venus Neptune is so wonderful to spend enjoying the arts, like the exquisiteness of the arts, of, beautiful music or a beautiful environment, or making art yourself. It is such a romantic aspect, although there can't, the warning we often have to bring in with Venus Neptune is it can be a little bit delusional at times. And so if things feel so magical and too good to be true, sometimes it's good to look through the veil, especially if something new is beginning then in a romantic liaison. But yeah, Venus Neptune, it's just that absolutely exquisite, ethereal, fairy tale romance kind of alignment.
Fun.
Yeah.
Nice Venus day energy.
Exactly. Yeah. Reaching exact alignment on Friday. And then as we move to September 24th, really there's this whole alignment that starts coming together. The moon moves, first it touches in a square to Mars, again, that more kind of fiery or energetic energy, and a trine to Uranus. And so earlier in the day may feel a little bit more agitated, active, needing to get something moving, get out of the house, change something in one's environment, that restlessness. But then the moon, by the end of the day, and this spills over into Sunday, the 25th, the moon starts moving through this stellium where it's the moon, Venus, Mercury, and then the sun. So if you can just picture that lineup, moon, Venus, Mercury, sun, beautiful stellium, and it's opposite Neptune and Jupiter. So even though Neptune and Jupiter are further apart now, they are, they made that exact conjunction in April of this year, and they're coming back together again. They won't be exact, but they are moving back towards each other, and they'll be lit up by this big stellium opposing it. So we have Jupiter, Neptune on the one side, the moon, Venus, Mercury, and the sun on the other side. I mean, that's a big moment. And the moon, as it moves through that stellium, conjoining Venus, conjoining Mercury, and then finally on Sunday, the 25th, conjoining the sun at the new moon. And that new moon happens right opposite Jupiter, while Mercury and Venus are right opposite Neptune. And so to break down the qualities of that energy, I already described Venus with Neptune. Mercury's coming into that as well, which brings in the poetic, which brings in the expressions of love. Mercury, Venus is like the classic I love you aspect. And so opposite Neptune, it's going to really bring in a very dreamy and enchanted and magical quality. Think of someone like John Keats, the young romantic poet, and his beautiful poetry that he was born with Sun, Mercury, Venus, Neptune. So we're getting that kind of poetic quality, this romantic poetic quality coming in at a world transit level. And then with the new moon opposing Jupiter, that can often bring in a sense of growth, expansion, joy, joviality, a kind of, very, very simply put, like a happiness. Like there's this Jupiterian sense of joy and optimism and positivity that infuses the new moon, that infuses the beginning of this next cycle. And so there's an interesting transition through the whole week where there is a shifting of the seasons, a shifting from one, the sun being in one sign to another, a kind of closing down, but then this opening out into a really kind of beautiful, exquisite, idealistic, joyful quality. So that alignment, the stellium opposite the Jupiter Neptune, which is coming back in, I think will give us certainly a welcome relief and opportunity for an appreciation of the beautiful things in life that I can imagine, considering the world conditions, many of us can feel disconnected from. And even if it comes in just for a few days, to be able to lean into that and participate in it.
I love all of that. Like, what an amazing weekend. It just sounds like incredible weekend weather that we haven't had for a really long time.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned the Jupiter Neptune energy coming back in, because somebody, after the Jupiter Neptune Pisces conjunction that we had in April, somebody amazing, awesome from the audience sent me this Jupiter candle, like this beautiful handmade yellow, bright, gold Jupiter candle. And I just felt inspired to pull it out and light it the other night. And I was remembering the expansiveness of that energy, of that time, like where we're dreaming into big dreams and possibilities. And at that time, I made some commitments that now I'm looking at going, oh my God, what was I thinking? Like, I don't have time for this. This is not where I need to be doing. But there's some of the things that are feeding my soul the most, even though I resist them because I don't feel like they're very practical. So it's interesting to hear that energy is kind of coming back, that we're going to get to experience it again on some level. Yeah. And so people may be remembering the threads of some of the dreams or the ideas or the visions that you planted in the ground in the spring or fall, if you're Southern Hemisphere, when Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct in Pisces, because that was a real big astrological moment this year. And it seemed to like come and go. At least that was my experience of it. I don't know how you felt, Becca, or if it's felt like it's lasted all year for you, or did it feel like it peaked and then it sort of went away?
It definitely felt like it peaked, like when it was exact in April, and March, April, May in particular. It just felt like this was the rainbow bubble that many of us were living within. And it has felt like it's kind of faded into the background. I still notice it in some correlations here and there, especially for individuals where that alignment is touching a very personal part of their chart. But this is coming back in. Jupiter will ingress back into Pisces once more in the later part of this year. And I think that this new moon with Mercury and Venus opposite the Jupiter and Neptune will in itself be a reminder. Like, faster moving inner planets, they trigger or they set off bigger outer planetary alignments, and they bring a focus onto it, where it kind of reignites whatever the archetypal qualities are of that particular outer planetary alignment. So I do think the end of this upcoming week, especially over the weekend, the 24th, 25th, will really carry that energy. So it is a good time to remember those dreams and to keep dreaming into them, and then look at, well, what do I need to do so that the dream isn't just a dream, it becomes a reality.
Oof, yes. All right. You did such an amazing job illustrating and walking us through the storyline of the week and showing us how it is this sort of going in. That I felt like there was a going in process, a little bit of a reevaluation process and review process happening. And then how we're ending with this real going out energy, very heart-based, very beautiful, and Venusian and Neptunian and all of those amazing qualities. So there's a full spectrum this week. And are you ready for the summary?
Of summarizing the whole week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what I get to do.
Oh, yes.
You're like,
oh, that's so much better.
You just go, okay, I guess I'll do that.
Yes, I can't wait.
Yes. All right. So essentially the biggest theme for the week, though, is this equinox, this closing down and going into something new. And this is shifting into Libra. We're beginning multiple levels of new cycles, and where the energy is really going to come into a new kind of balance. And on Monday, the major themes is this Venus trine Uranus and Sun trine Pluto. So there's an integration of things that we need to look at. There's a liberation of Venusian energy. There's maybe a social energy. There's an opening of the heart, awareness of aesthetics. It seems like a great day to do art as well. There's a lot of good days to do art this week, but this definitely seems like one of those. And on Tuesday, we have the moon making many aspects, and you walked us through that storyline of the moon, which is basically starting emotionally raw, going inside, having this opportunity to maybe talk things out and be verbal, and especially at home. So those are going to be some of the themes for Tuesday. Wednesday, we have this Mercury Jupiter energy, which is bringing rich material, big ideas, grandeur, abundance of ideas, broadening of the scope of intellect. Perfect timing. And I know that you selected the date for your astrological initiation. You and your dad looked at the astrology and made sure that the energy was good for the workshop. And so then we also have this moon. Moon is activating as well. So moon sextile Mars, that there could be a little bit of a restlessness in the day. This is a great day to clean your house. You might want to work out before the workshop, get some energy out, set your day up so that you can actually release some of that energy that might be coming up. Thursday, this is this moon in a T-square to Saturn and Uranus. Something's got to give. This, be aware of your own emotional sensitivity, others' emotional sensitivity. Be attuned to that, and also be attuned to this question: what wants to give? What is no longer sustainable, and what needs to shift? That you may be at a breaking point. Where are the places in your life that you are at a breaking point? Can I take on the hard work of what this change entails? So taking a real Saturnian perspective, like, can I actually take this on right now, this big change? Then also you highlighted that there could be this complex blending, that it might not be a hard break, that there is this complex blending of old energies and new energies in new ways. Be flexible with mistakes, you said. This is also the day that Sun moves into Libra, and it conjoins Mercury retrograde. This is, again, an opportunity for this revision, review, revise thing we've been doing since Mercury went into a retrograde, for it to be highlighted. And this is an opportunity, an invitation to slow down. On Friday, Mercury moves into Virgo. So you're saying that it might not be as challenging to do these review processes. Venus is also opposing Neptune. So this is exquisite beauty, the union of the celestial with the heart and love and devotion. It's idealistic, it's romantic, it's dreamy. Enjoy the arts, make art, and be careful of delusions. So if you're falling in love on this day, maybe take a little bit of the rose-colored glasses. Just know that you probably are wearing rose-colored glasses. And so be as discerning as you can. Maybe just experience it today, but don't go to Vegas and get married today to the person that you met today.
Right. Okay. You've known them a long time. It's a different story. Enjoy the magic.
Right. Enjoy the magic. Yes. Okay. On Saturday, the 24th, we have Moon square Mars, trine Uranus. We have this amazing moon, Venus, Mercury, Sun opposite Neptune and Jupiter. So I love just the visual of that. It's so beautiful to imagine it. And so what is that illuminating? What is that highlighting? This, again, poetic, expressions of love, enchanted, magical. These words I just love. I love the word enchanted. It's such an amazing word, and it's not used enough. So this is a day for that growth, expansion, joy, joviality, and happiness. Again, this idea of closing things down and opening up to something very new, something very, this lunar cycle is starting off with this beautiful energy. Not only is the lunar cycle starting off with that, but like you said, the equinox is setting that kind of energy into effect. And then we also have this Jupiter-Neptune reignited. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anything that I did not say correctly or that you would want to add?
Well, just when you brought up the word enchanted, it's such a Neptunian word in general, but when combined with Venus or combined with Mercury, we particularly see it come through language or in artistic expression or in like the enchantment of love, or how we observe under Venus Neptune alignments, the world itself can look more beautiful. And the word enchanted comes from the Latin incantare, meaning like to be in a song. And so to be enchanted is to be within kind of the music of magic, of the music of the spheres, like you're fully immersed in that. So I just love that root of the word enchanted. And the only thing I would bring in specifically is that when we were talking about the Mercury-Jupiter opposition, that's here through the whole week. And it has been even longer because of Mercury moving so slowly in opposition to Jupiter. So just, I was particularly noting its potential presence on Wednesday, but that's an undercurrent throughout, not for us to tie it to a particular day, which I think the way I brought it up could make it seem that way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I need to share a magical moment with all of you, because what you just said about the word enchanted and how it comes from encantare, which means to be in a song, it relates to one of the commitments that I made in April in the Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces expansive moment. It is one of those commitments that I'm looking at going, oh my God, what was I thinking? And that was joining the songwriter's journey, which is something I'm in right now. And I'm actually having to like start to write music. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I even doing? So I love that you just brought that up as a totally magical synchronicity for me right now. Cause it's like, I was saying how much I love the word enchanted. And you're like, well, it means to be in a song. It's like, oh God, that's the one thing that I committed to that I'm going, oh my gosh, was I nuts? And so it's having this opportunity to be back in that energy, to be back in that dreamy, what is possible, poetic, all of that. And so I'm grateful for it. And I'm very grateful for you re-enchanting it for all of us, breathing new life and awareness for all of us. And I'm grateful for the universe for continuing to do this and to help us stay in this place of magic over and over again. Which again brings us to your workshop and this opportunity we have to be reinitiated into the magic, into the mystery, into the beauty that astrology can really infuse into our daily reality. This can be a lived experience every single day. Rick Levine and I had the Cosmic Connection on last Thursday, and we were talking about invoking planetary energies. And one of the books that he recommended is by Carolyn Casey, and it's called Making the Gods Work for You, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek title, she even says in the book. But it's also on this theme of how do we bring these planetary energies, these archetypes, these gods into our life on a daily basis and dance and play and live with them all the time. So I'm so grateful that you and your dad are going to be doing this week. For any of you who want to join, it's astrologyhub.com/initiation. We'd love to have you, and it's going to be quite an experience.
Oh, we're so much looking forward to it as well. And thank you so much for the opportunity for us to present this material.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Becca. It's been such a pleasure to have the weekly weather with you. It's been such a pleasure to share this time with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.